meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the November 9th, 2020 meeting of the City of Raleigh Board of Adjustment. My name is Rodney Swink and I'm chair of the board. I'm joined today by my fellow board members, John Kuntz, Donald Mile, Kathy Rudisell, Justin Sutton, Stephen Kinney, and Michael Rainey. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We conduct evidentiary hearings on requests for variances, design adjustments, design alternates, and special use permits, among other requests. The Board of Adjustment assures that the due process rights of the parties are protected when hearing cases. Since today's meeting will be conducted remotely, in addition to the general quasi-judicial rules, today's hearings will be conducted in accordance with state statutes that allow for remote quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings during the current COVID-19 states of emergency. Each applicant on today's agenda was notified before being placed on today's agenda that this meeting would be conducted using a remote electronic platform and has consented to the board conducting the evidentiary hearing on their application using this remote platform. Notice of today's remote meeting was also provided in several ways, including mailed notice to all property owners within 100 feet of each subject property. All presentations, documentations, exhibits, or other materials will be submitted at today's evidentiary hearings or posted online in board docs prior to this meeting. These materials can be viewed at any time during today's meeting by visiting www.raleighNC.gov/board-adjustment and clicking the link to view the agenda. Finally, if at any time a participant has issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator. Chat function has been disabled for this meeting for all participants and the board members, except for the ability to message the moderator if you have technical difficulties. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I ask our attorney to briefly explain for the participants how we will be conducting today's evidentiary hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Swink. My name is Catherine Hoffman-Hill, and I'm the attorney for the Raleigh Board of Adjustment. Today's evidentiary hearings will proceed very similar to a regular meeting with a few minor adjustments. First, all witnesses must be sworn in. Because of this remote format, individuals who signed up to participate, as well as city staff participants, have already signed a written oath form, which will be reaffirmed on the record as they testify today. Participants have also already provided written consent to today's remote meeting platform. We'll start with a staff providing a presentation. The applicant will then be acknowledged to present their case and witnesses. The board will acknowledge the attorney or applicant for the case first as the point person for the applicant. As a reminder to all participants, you have provided your potential documents, presentations, exhibits, and other materials ahead of the meeting, but please make sure to submit your evidence into the record when you present your case. Following the applicant, anybody who has signed up to speak in support of the case will be given an opportunity to speak, followed by any opponents who have signed up to speak. After each opponent, the applicant will be given the opportunity to ask questions. I don't think that's at play today, though. I don't think we have any to sign up in opposition to a case. But the applicant will then be given the opportunity for any rebuttal and closing statements. When all testimony is complete, we will close the evidentiary hearing and the board members will deliberate and vote on the case. So with that, I will give it back to Mr. Swink for the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. One announcement regarding today's agenda. Evidentiary hearing number 4, which is 1202 South Bloodworth Street, that's BOA-0054-2020, will be deferred to a later date at the request of the applicant. Again, that's BOA 0054-2020 is going to be deferred. So we're going to conduct the evidentiary hearing on today's agenda. We're going to start by reaffirming the oath for the potential staff witnesses for today's case. As I call your name, please acknowledge your presence, then I will swear you in. Keegan McDonald, planning staff case presenter.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Eric Hodge, planning staff case presenter.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Justin Rometta, zoning administrator.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Bradley Kimbrell, Transportation Plan Review.
Yes.
Mr. Kimbrell,
Yeah, here.
do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. We'll now call the cases in the order that they appear on the agenda, starting with evidentiary hearing item 1. 4000 Sumner Boulevard, Fox Road LLC property owner. This is a variance, BOA-0053-2020. Got a couple of witnesses, applicant witnesses to call. So let me call your name, and when I do, please state your name and address, and I will reaffirm your oath. Starting with Jack Shelton.
I'm here.
Give us your address, please.
3300 Northeast Expressway, Atlanta, Georgia, 30341.
Swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Tommy Craven.
Craven and Associates, 3803B Computer Drive.
Okay, Mr. Craven, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, Keegan McDonald, it's your opportunity.
Presentation. All right, thank you. I'll begin just by reading the nature of request. So this is a variance for complete relief from the 2-foot minimum ground floor elevation requirement set forth in section 324F1 of the Unified Development Ordinance to construct 3 apartment buildings at or below average curb level on a 15.64 acre property zoned CX4CU located at 4000 Sumner Boulevard. So this is the subject property here. Advancing to 2 slides, just to again cover the ground floor elevation requirement. Essentially what it states is that the ground floor elevation of the building must be at least 2 feet above curb level or the crown of the street if there is no curb. And in this instance, the applicant is seeking relief for the entire site relevant to the 3 proposed apartment buildings. This slide shows the topography that exists on the site. As you can see, there's approximately 20 feet of fall from Triangle Oaks Drive and Sumner Boulevard towards the center of the site, where it appears there's an existing temporary drainage pond. And due to this topography change, the applicant is seeking relief from that ground floor elevation requirement such that their buildings not be held to having to be 2 feet above average curb level along Sumner Boulevard, Triangle Oaks Drive, and Triangle Oaks Drive specifically. Here is the site plan. Please note that north in this image is to the left. So Sumner Boulevard is at the top, Sumner Boulevard is to the left, Triangle Oaks Drive is to the top and curves down, and then there's a new Wake Hills lane that will be installed through the middle of the site. Again, the intention here of the request is due to the severe topography on the site. The applicant is seeking relief from this minimum ground floor elevation requirement relevant to all 3 structures. And I believe that concludes my presentation. Staff does not have any comments on the variance standards for this case, but am available to answer any questions. And if not, I can pass it off to the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. McDonald? Nope. Okay, then let us move on to the applicant, Mr. Birch.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Michael Birch, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Again, already kind of somewhat been introduced to the other members of the team who are on this afternoon. First is Jack Shelton with Hathaway Companies, the developer of the project. And then Tommy Craven, professional engineer with Priest Craven and Associates, who has prepared the subdivision and site plan and who is available to testify as well. Just at the beginning of our hearing, I'd ask that our application, our presentation, the staff report, and staff's presentation be included in the record.
Okay.
So if you could go to the next slide, please. As Keegan mentioned, it's about a 16 acre site up near Triangle Town Center, south of Sumner Boulevard. One of the kind of the last remaining parcels to be developed as part of the larger kind of Pointer Place development. This property is currently zoned CX-4-CU, and it's subject to the zoning conditions of case Z-501, which again applies to the development on the south side of Sumner and on the north side. So kind of the shopping centers on the north side of Sumner, and then the kind of residential is on the south side of Sumner Boulevard. But it's important to know the zoning because the zoning conditions impose a maximum building setback along the public streets, so Sumner and Triangle Oaks Drive, a maximum building setback of 20 feet. So for Sumner, that's condition 4A5, and for Triangle Oaks, it's condition 5B4. But those are, again, maximum setbacks of 20 feet. Just the code today would allow those buildings to be between 10 and 55 feet. So it's kind of more restrictive than the current code, essentially requiring these buildings to be closer to those public streets. And we'll kind of touch on why that's an issue. Second, as Keegan showed in the site plan, these we're proposing apartment buildings, and under the UDO, that has essentially a build to or frontage standard for that building type that requires that 70% of the property's frontage along primary streets, that a building be located within that build to area. Both Sumner and Triangle Oaks Drive are determined to be primary streets, so that 70% standard applies to all three of the proposed buildings. But essentially that requires both the buildings to be pulled up close to the road, and it requires these buildings to be fairly long to achieve that 70% standard. So just a little background on the development. Keegan, if you could go to the next slide. And the slide after that. Okay. Again, just from an orientation standpoint, Sumner Boulevard up to the north is now on the left-hand side of your screen, and Triangle Oaks Drive is on the kind of the top of the plan on your screen there right now. So Keegan mentioned the significant amount of fall from Triangle Oaks Drive kind of to the center of the property. I also want to note that Sumner Boulevard and Triangle Oaks Drive are existing streets that have essentially set the grade that this development has to play within, the parameters that this development has to play within. And along the property's frontage along Sumner, we've got approximately 12 feet of fall along that frontage along Sumner, and then kind of a rise along Triangle Oaks Drive down closer to building 2000. This is the site plan that you see. And would just note, let's see if you could go to the next slide there. So we provided kind of zoom in kind of exhibits for each of the buildings that help kind of identify kind of the ground floor issues for each building. Let's see here. So for building 1000, the average curve elevation is about 325, which means the building, ground floor elevation of the building would have to be at 327. And our current design is at 323. So we're looking for, again, 4 feet overall, but I'll let Tommy kind of get into how these buildings will address the street in just a minute. But to address the grade, fill's already being brought in. These buildings are had to be pulled closer to the street. We have to provide ADA compliant access points, and because of the zoning conditions, max setback, because of the build to frontage requirements, it's practically, and because of the topography of the site, it's really impractical to provide ADA accessibility for these buildings, both on the front and on the back side of these buildings where the actual accessible spaces will be, due to those factors, without bringing in a very significant amount of additional fill. If you could go to the next slide. It's building 2000, and if you go a couple more slides, I think there's a slide that does show maybe more detail on the ground floor. Yeah, there you go. And we can speak to those additional details as well. But I'll just touch on the findings quickly. The unnecessary hardship, again, it's impractical to develop this site with apartment buildings where the ground floor elevation is 2 feet above grade because of the significant amount of fill dirt that would require to be brought in to have these buildings, both 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, up to a height where that would comply with the UDO. These factors are peculiar to the property, again, being one of the last remaining pieces to be developed. The streets have already kind of set the grade. There's also a pond existing on the site today. And there's significant fall off of those streets to the center of the site and along the streets. Not the actions of the applicant or owner. Again, these conditions were set in place. Sumner was put in 2003, Triangle Oaks in 2013 by another developer. And so the current applicant with this property is really just playing with conditions that were put in place by others. And finally, the last one, consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. As you all have heard on a number of these cases, there really is no intent statement that provides why this regulation exists. To the extent that it has any relationship to stormwater, and Tommy can talk to this more if the board wants to hear it, but we are complying with the stormwater. None of these buildings will be impacted by stormwater. In fact, a lot of them will look like they're even with the street. And from a spirit, purpose, and intent standpoint, I'll defer to Tommy on this. Some of the landscaping and other features that are being provided as a part of the development will really obscure any relationship in terms of elevation between the building and the street. So, and a lot of these do have portions of the building that are above the street. So with that, Tommy, if you want to add a few comments before we close.
Certainly. Thank you, Michael. Michael, Keegan covered everything, covered the site pretty well in the fall across the site. Michael addressed a lot of the concerns and complications that this ordinance creates. I'd like to just take a minute to help put the request into some perspective and give it some scale. These buildings are pretty large. Each of them are well over 300 feet long. They're 80 feet deep, and they're 4 stories tall. As Michael pointed out, with the build to requirements, we're pulling these buildings up to within about 20 feet of the right of way, with some variance depending upon the cutouts and the nooks and crannies along the face of the buildings. There will be a lawn area that will be open space between the sidewalk and the face of the buildings. There will be foundation plantings along the face of the buildings and street trees along the sidewalk. So just from the scale and a visual perspective, in my opinion, it is highly unlikely that anyone is even going to notice the relationship of the first floor elevation to the street grade. the mass and scale is just such that that won't occur. And the complication of raising these buildings isn't just under the building. That translates through the building to the back of the building, creates problems with ADA access to the parking spaces that are located behind the building. And then that same 4-foot increase winds up translating itself all the way across the site until you get to the retaining wall at the back end of the site. So it's a tremendous increase in the amount of dirt that will have to be brought in from off-site in order to grade this site and make it, bring it into balance. And a significant additional cost in raising these retaining walls another 4 feet or so. And with that, I'd just be glad to answer any questions that anyone on the board may have.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Tommy. And just in closing, again, the board has seen a number of these, and I think you've heard the testimony in the past from the city that the city is looking at doing away with this regulation. But I just want to highlight a few recent cases. BOA 52-2019, where the board approved a similar variance on February 4th of this year. BOA-18-2020 decided in June of this year. And then BOA-46-2020, I believe in September of this year. So again, we think we're consistent with all those previous approvals. We've established the hardship and the fact that it's peculiar to the property. And at that time, that concludes our presentation, and we're here to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Mr. McDonald, anything come up on your end that you have a question about?
No, not at this time.
Okay, no one else signed up to speak in either support or opposition. So we'll go to the last chance for board questions.
I have a question for Keegan.
Okay.
Hearing all of what Michael Burgess said about the need for this regulation and the city, I guess, could consider removing it. When would we be concerned, for my edification, when would we be concerned about changing these elevations such that it would create an issue of flooding, drainage, or appearance?
I'm understanding your question correctly. You're asking about the potential connection between this ground floor elevation requirement and potential flooding or stormwater regulations, is that correct? Yeah,
well, exactly. Why are we so worried about ground floor elevation? We have this regulation.
Yeah, and actually, I can provide some insight as far as I'm aware, and maybe Eric Hodge can also provide additional insight as to the intent, because I think it was adopted with the original incarnation of the UDO. But I think the idea is such that apartment buildings have a required build to, and thus are intended to address the street in a certain way, in a certain manner. And most are relatively close to the street. And I think the intention with the ground floor units would be slightly above curb level to provide some privacy, such that window openings wouldn't provide direct view or open view into the unit. But as far as we're aware, this is not something that's seen tremendous support through the market, if you will. And I think that's evidenced by the vast number of these requests that have come to the board, especially as it relates to apartment buildings, because of the challenges that come with building on such a large site, where frequently grade comes into play, and the necessary solution to fill in the site can be very costly, just to achieve this desired effect. Just to add on to that, I will note that this requirement does not have any bearing on any other stormwater regulations. So those would hold fast, and they evaluate their requirements separate and independently of certain zoning requirements. And so those would not change even if we were to alter this ground floor elevation requirement.
Okay. Mr. Coons, did you have something?
No, I did not.
Okay. Any other board questions? Ms. Rudisil, anything else?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Birch, any last thoughts here?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, you said you had nothing else to add. So let me close the evidentiary hearing and we will move to board deliberations. This is a variance case. I'll entertain a commentary or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Russell to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. We have a motion and a second. We'll go to a roll call vote.
Thank you. Ms. Russo?
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Coons?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman Swink?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton?
Approved.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us move along to evidentiary hearing number 2. This is 815 Capitol Boulevard and 2920 Glen Ridge Drive. Eagle Rock 50 LLC and CB Hotel LLC property owners. This is a variance BOA 0058-2020. We have one witness. When I call your name, please state your address for the record, your name and address for the record. Gray Harrell.
Avenue, 1 Glenwood Avenue, Suite 201.
Okay, Mr. Harrell, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. McDonald, this is yours.
Excuse me. One moment, please. Mr. Harrell, could you repeat your address, please? You were cut off partially.
Yes, it's 1 Glenwood Avenue, Suite 201, Raleigh, 27603.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. So I'll begin by reading the nature of request. Before I do, though, I want to note that request number 3 that cites UDO section 331, there was a typo in the advertisement, the legal advertisement. It should read section 332. We notified the applicant of this typo prior to the meeting, and they want to proceed, but I just wanted to let the board know that it was unfortunately advertised incorrectly, but I'll repeat it correctly for the record here. So this is a request by Eagle Rock 50 LLC and CB Hotel LLC, both property owners, for a 4-foot variance to the minimum ground floor elevation requirement set forth in section 324F to permit a ground floor elevation 2 feet below the average curb elevation for building 1. A 2.5-foot variance to the same ground floor elevation requirement to permit a ground floor elevation 0.5 foot below the average curb elevation for building 3, and also a 3-foot variance to the maximum building height requirement set forth in UDO section 331 to permit building 4 to have a height of 71 feet in order to construct an approximately 328 unit apartment complex on a 12.99 acre property zone CU and RX4 CU located at 2815 Capitol Boulevard and 2920 Glen Ridge Drive. So here is the property. It consists of 2 parcels that are located immediately adjacent to one another along Capitol Boulevard. There's an existing building on part of the site that used to be a hotel property. So The two parts of this request are first ground floor elevation, which of course we just reviewed in the previous request, and then also building height for one of the buildings that will be located towards the rear of the site, away from Capitol Boulevard. So the average grade for a building, I wanted to just review this as it relates to building height. So average grade is determined by calculating the average of the highest and lowest elevation along pre-development or improved grade, whichever is more restrictive, meaning whichever is lower, along each building elevation and averaging all elevations. So essentially, you have an average along each facade or elevation, and then you take the average of those averages. And where land disturbance has been approved by the city through the mass grading process, average grade shall be considered the improved grade following the completion of such mass grading. I will note in this instance, mass grading has not been completed, and thus they are held to the more restrictive grades that come out of the averaging process, which is part of what's necessitating the need for a variance. In the last part of this, that any building subject to the standards of section 227, average grade shall be the more restrictive of pre-development or improved grade. This property is not subject to 227, which applies to infill properties that are generally on smaller sites and more applicable to smaller scale residential development. So here is the site plan. Again, to review, there's ground floor elevation relief being sought for building 1 fronting Capitol Boulevard, and also building 3 that'll have frontage along Alloy Street. And then the maximum building height relief is being sought to building 4, located at the rear along a to be constructed Alloy Street. So again, similar to the previous project, there is fairly severe topography that exists on the site. The topographic change generally occurs southwest to northeast in terms of the overall fall. As you can see, towards the intersection of Highwood Boulevard, Glen Ridge Drive, and Capitol Boulevard, in the bottom left corner of your screen, topographic elevation at that point is around 280 feet, and fall continues towards the northeast to approximately 220, 210 feet. So there is a significant grade change along this property, which is the primary driver of both requests to ground floor elevation and overall building height. Here is just a street level view along Capitol Boulevard showing that existing hotel property. And as you can see, this is moving again kind of down the site, and you can see that grade change along Capitol Boulevard, which does impact the site even as you move towards the interior of the property. And before passing it off to the applicant, staff doesn't have much comment related to the ground floor elevation requirements, really only to building height. And again, that's related to building number 4, which is located at the rear along Alloy Street. Variance standard number 4 states that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. Staff just wants to note that the intent of the building height regulations in this instance is to create uniform massing and intensity within zoning districts, and also to note that building height for 4-story buildings was recently increased from 62 feet to 68 feet in July 2020. The intention there actually was to provide for slightly larger floor to ceiling heights to accommodate a wider range of building types within these zoning districts. And so that was a 6-foot increase that occurred just a few months ago. And this request is for a height of 71 feet. So just wanted to note the intention there and also a little bit of history surrounding the building height regulations. It's also worth noting that for building zone 7 stories and above, there actually is no maximum height in feet measurement. There is only a maximum number of stories that's assessed. So I believe that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if not, I can pass it off to you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. McDonald. Any questions? I have one, and that's regarding the building 4. I want to be clear, they have not done mass grading at this time?
Yes, that's my understanding, that they have not done mass grading. Typically, well, the UDO, the current height methodology, as shown in a previous slide, does make an allowance for people to use proposed grade if mass grading is completed. It's typically a very large undertaking and costly to complete mass grading prior to having your site plan approved, and thus it's not something that's taken advantage of very frequently.
Okay.
And it's my understanding it's not been done on this project at this time. But if it was done, it would allow them to take advantage of the improved grade. And as I understand it, the need for a variance would probably not exist. Also, just as a point of reference, because we talked about pending UDO changes, there is some consideration to, or I should say there's an active text change that has not yet moved through, but is under consideration to modify these building height standards as well. So just wanted to give that note on the policy front.
Okay, thank you. And I'll follow up with the applicant, but conceivably the mass grading could resolve this question to an acceptable height of 68 feet. I'm speculating again. I will ask the applicant that. You do not need to speculate unless you think you have an answer.
Yes, I would defer to the applicant just because they could speak to their own process and any other constraints.
Super, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. McDonald? Okay, let's move along. Ms. Stewart, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the board. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street. We do have Gray Harrell of McAdams with us as well. If we do need to dive into kind of very detailed questions about exactly how these measurements would change under the text change, things like that, although I will also address those questions. I'll go through these first slides relatively quickly as Mr. McDonald covered these in fairly close detail. I will note, I believe we may have had a communication problem. I had actually withdrawn our request related to building 1. And so you don't see it highlighted here. And the purpose of this slide was really just to orient you to the site and to show you that proposed alloy street coming through the site that does not exist today. But Capitol Boulevard, obviously, and Glenridge Drive are both existing streets. Next slide, please. And to zoom in a little bit, we'll be focusing today on those buildings 3 and building 4. Next slide. If we can skip this slide altogether, since we've looked at that one. So this is Alloy Street, and this gives you a little bit of a feel for the significant fill needed on this site. You saw the topography and its rather extreme fall across the site, and so in order to put that new street in that direction, you can see that there's very significant fill there. Next slide, please. So this is the request for building 3, and our request is for a 2.5-foot variance to the required ground floor elevation. And the reason for this, I think this is not new to anyone here today, but with the fall across the site, what you end up with, if you raise the entire building 2 feet above the grade as measured from the frontage, is a wall that has bounced around a little bit as it's been designed, but somewhere between 4 and 5 feet tall, kind of underneath the building, kind of this blank wall area that really doesn't provide benefits to anyone, and just just kind of looks very strange there on the site. Next slide, please. So this gives an idea of the actual fill amounts. This is the grading plan as we cross the street over to building 4. And here, this is where we're looking for the building height request, and this is a 3-foot variance. I do want to mention that the UDO, as Mr. McDonald described, currently requires the building height be measured from the most restrictive of the existing or the proposed grade. Next slide, please. And so here you see that measurement in the blue on the left, that building is being measured all the way down to the existing grade, and there's quite a gap there. If this variance were not granted, what would happen is that you'd still get the 4 stories. You'd end up with a lower roof pitch, and it would simply flatten the roof from what is more typical for the area. Also, he mentioned the proposed text change, TC 420. That text change would change where the grade were measured from. So that would allow it to be measured from the proposed grade. And if that were to be approved, this variance would no longer be needed because the height of the building as measured from the proposed grade is only in the neighborhood of 60 feet, so well below the 68 feet that are permitted in this area. To address the question of the mass grading permit, Mr. McDonald described it quite well, but the issue is a matter of going through extensive design that in fact will never be needed, because my understanding is that what happens if that gets done before the subdivision is approved, what you need to go ahead and dedicate your tree conservation area, design your stormwater retention, all of these features, and then once the subdivision is approved, those things will actually be moved and sort of recalculated from the beginning. And so there is kind of a lot of waste in that process of going through the mass grading permit, particularly here where we would end up with a similar results in the end, and with the proposed text change kind of coming down the pike. This is a very small change. This is a 3-foot request in the building height, and like I said, it would really just affect the roof pitch in the end, if not granted, and this would make it more aesthetically pleasing for the neighbors. Thank you.
Sorry, I always forget to unmute. Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions for Ms. Stewart regarding this? So to be clear on my end, I think I understood you. The building itself, the height issue is because of where it would be placed on the site. It's not that the building structure itself is going to be 71 feet tall, but the nature of the grading that's going to cause that additional height. Is that how I understand it?
That's exactly right. There are approximately 11 feet of fill in this area, and those 11 feet count toward the height of the building because we have to measure from the existing grade 11 feet down. So absolutely, the building is quite a bit shorter than the 68 feet allowed. Okay, thanks.
Any other board questions? Again, we had no other sign up for support or opposition to this. We'll move along. Board did not have any questions. Ms. Stewart, I trust you've covered yours sufficiently, although you have anything else to add?
You know, I believe as I was withdrawing the request for building 1, I did fail to request that our application and presentation be admitted to the record.
Very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. McDonald, anything further from you?
No, not at this time.
Okay. This is a variance. So in that case, I'll close the hearing, excuse me. Let's go to the board deliberations. This is a variance. Again, for the record, did I understand you've removed item 1, so we're only looking at the latter 2 items?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we've got a variance, 2 items to be considered. I'll entertain some discussion or a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second, John Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Let's go to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Mr. Mile?
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approved.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approved.
Thank you. That makes 5, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let us move along then to evidentiary hearing number 3. This is 8080 Arco Corporate Drive, Briar Creek Corporate LLC, the property owner. This is a design alternates case A-28-20. We have one witness. Let me invite Michael Van Praan. Please state your address for the record. Michael Van Praan.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Michael Van Praan. I'm at 129 Beasley Avenue, Durham, North Carolina.
And that zip?
27703.
Okay, thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald, welcome back.
Thank you. So again, I'll begin by reading the nature of request. So this is case 82820. Briar Creek Corporate LLC is the property owner. They are requesting multiple design adjustments. First, a 7-foot design adjustment to the required 52-foot minimum right-of-way width set forth in section 846B of the Unified Development Ordinance. A 3-foot design adjustment to the required 38-foot back of curb to back of curb. A 1-foot design adjustment to the required 7.5-foot minimum bicycle lane width set forth in the same section, and a 1-foot design adjustment to the required 11-foot minimum travel lane width. And lastly, a 0.5-foot design adjustment to the required 2-foot maintenance strip in order to construct an office building on a 7.04 acre property zoned OX7PL located at 8080 Arco Corporate Drive. So again, these are design adjustments related to roadway and streetscape improvements. I want to note that a portion of the subject property actually lies within what is the roadway effectively. So as you can see, kind of towards the bottom left of your image, the property actually cuts into what is known as Arco Corporate Drive. And it's my understanding there's an existing public access easement within that section, and also actually on the flip side of the road that it's owned by a separate property owner. But point being that the public right-of-way transitions into a public access easement, which are slightly different in terms of how they are owned in essence, in terms of being dedicated versus an access easement, which continues in its private ownership. But it's my understanding the intention here is to really maintain the existing street and roadway and streetscape components, and thus the need for relief to the what would otherwise be required. Here is the site plan along Arco Corporate Drive, and showing the proposed building and parking. This is the cross section for the Avenue 4-lane divided street, listing off the components that are required therein. And just to recap, there's relief being sought to the right-of-way width is A, B, the back of curb to back of curb width, also to the bicycle lane, which is shown as G, the travel lane, which is shown as H, and also the maintenance strip shown as D. So all in all, minor adjustments to the required street section. This is, again, a design adjustment, and transportation staff is available for any specific questions, but it's my understanding staff does not have any comment at this time. And so if you do have any questions, we're here to answer them, and if not, I can pass it off to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. This is a public street, correct?
So it's my understanding that it is partially a public street. You can see in this image, I know it's fairly faint, but it shows an existing 90-foot public right-of-way under the label for Arco Corporate Street Drive. And then when you shift from right to left in this image, a portion of it is actually a public access easement. So there is obviously a slight difference. I would probably defer to transportation to delve into that difference, but effectively it'll be available to the public to use as a roadway. It's just a different means. One is conveyed and one is still held privately but kept as a public access easement.
Well, I only ask because it's just a curiosity to me to have a situation like that with an easement access. It's just curious. It's just interesting.
Yeah, understood. Perhaps Bradley or Tara could shed some light maybe on the history or how common this particular condition is within the city.
I'm probably okay unless any other board members want to hear a little more history. Something I can learn offline at some point, unless as we get further information from the applicant, the question comes up again. Any other board member questions? In that case, let us move along to Ms. Stewart.
Thank you, members of the board. I'd like to request that our presentation and application materials be admitted to the record today.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit different view showing that end of the public right-of-way up in the top right corner and then ending in a public access easement. And the important distinction here is that these right-of-way requirements are only applied along the public right-of-way. They are not applied within the access easement. So the request that you have today is fundamentally a simple request regarding the right-of-way width. And that change in right-of-way width gets allocated among 4 different sub-elements of that width. So they're really kind of one and the same. Next slide, please. Importantly, the street section is already built and in place today. Therefore, even if the public portion of the street along this frontage were to be updated to the newer standards, the privately owned portion, the access easement, would not be, and that would create an inconsistent street section along this frontage, causing cyclists and drivers to have to adapt. I do have additional slides simply showing one that you've already seen, which is the standard section today, as well as the existing section, if we want to zoom in on kind of exact details of those individual requests as far as the bike lane and those areas. But effectively, this is a very simple request to simply keep the right-of-way in the state that it is in today, and that matches the aligning roadway within the easement area. And I'm available for questions, and we have Michael Van Praan with us as well.
Mr. Swink, I think you might be on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm hearing background noise, so I consciously mute and then I forget to unmute. I apologize. So let me restate that. Any board member questions for Mr. Stewart? Okay, and again, Mr. McDonald, you've had your say, but any questions you might have at this point?
None at this time.
Thank you. No one else signed up to speak in support or opposition. So last chance for any questions or further commentary from anyone? Since you just had a chance.
Straightforward.
Excuse me?
Pretty straightforward, I think.
Okay, very good. Let's close the evidentiary hearing and move to the board deliberations. This is a design alternate case. Kind of a unique street system. That's fascinating, but it does not change the request or the statement of the need for it. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisil. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Let's go to a roll call vote then.
Thank you. Mr. Coons?
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Russo.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Swank.
Approve.
Thank you. Who am I missing? Mr. Kenny? No.
Sutton.
Mr. Sutton?
Yes, approve.
And Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Thank you. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Thank you. It makes fun.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let us move now to our last case of the day, evidentiary hearing 5. And remember, we skipped 4 because they've deferred. This is 7224 Madera Court, Paula and Michael Willert, property owners. This is a variance, BOA 0055-2020. Now, Michael Willert, would you please state your name and address for the record?
Good afternoon. My address is 7224 Madera Court, Raleigh, 27615.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Eric Hodge, welcome.
Thank you. Does everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So BOA 55-2020 is a request to the side setback requirements set forth in section 2.2.1.b.3 of the Unified Development Ordinance in order to construct an attached carport, which results with a side yard setback of 6.2 feet on a 0.44 acre property zoned residential 4, which is located at 7224 Madera Court. So this is showing the neighborhood zoned residential 4. In the planimetric view here, you can see the structure a little better than you can in the aerial that was on the previous slide. They're looking to add the garage attached carport on the right side of the existing structure on top of the existing driveway, which is on the eastern side of the property. Here's the proposed site plan. The footprint of the covering would be located here, just to help clarify for those looking where the structure, the carport is proposed. And here is a rendering when viewed from the front of the home, showing the proposed carport here on the left side of the structure. Again, the R4 zoning calls for carports, anything attached to the home, such as a carport, to be at least 10 foot from the side property line. And again, they're proposing to reduce that down by 3.8 feet. Unless you have any questions of staff at this time, that would conclude our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, let's go to Mr. Willert. Welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to present our case. And not being an attorney, I'd like to ask whether this presentation needs to be entered into the record.
Yes, you can just make that request to Mr. Swank that all of your materials be entered into the record.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Existing conditions. You see a street map of 7224 Madera Court from the city of Raleigh and Wake County IMAPs. This is a single-family detached home in the Woodmere Hills subdivision. It was constructed in 1970. We've owned the property since 1986. There is a 10-foot wide concrete driveway widening to 14 feet when abutting the east side of the residence adjacent to the side entrance. There's no garage or carport. Next slide. This is a view of the driveway from the street with an SUV parked in the proposed carport location. Next slide. This is a view of the driveway from the street without the SUV. Next slide. And this is a view of the driveway from the backyard showing the side door and steps. Next slide. This is the existing plot plan showing the concrete driveway and the current side setback from the home of 18.5 feet in front and 20.3 feet in the rear. Next slide. Proposed plans. Build a 12-foot wide by 20-foot long carport covering the existing driveway attached to the side of the house. Next slide. It's a view of the front elevation of the home with the proposed carport. Next slide. This is the side elevation of the home with the proposed carport. Next slide. This is the plot plan with the proposed 12-foot by 20-foot carport and side setback of 6.2 feet in the front and 7.7 feet in the rear. Next slide. This is a floor plan of the proposed carport showing the side door and steps. Next slide. Requested variances. A variance of 2.3 feet at the back of the proposed carport, resulting in a side setback of 7.7 feet, and a variance of 3.8 feet at the front of the proposed carport, resulting in a side setback of 6.2 feet. Next slide. Addressing the UDO variance standards, number one, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. The strict application of the side setback requirement prevents modifications needed to construct a carport along the east side of the house where there is a driveway and an entry door, improve accessibility to the home, and increase value. Next slide. Number two, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. Existing conditions limit the placement of a carport to the east side of the lot where there is an existing concrete driveway and entry door. In the side setback along the west property line, there is no driveway or entry door. The back portion of the lot has no driveway. Due to where the house is situated on the lot, it is not parallel to the lot line. There are 20.3 feet between the back of the house and the side lot line and 18.5 feet between the front of the house and the side lot line. The proposed carport would be a standard size 12-foot wide by 20-foot long carport. This would require a variance of 2.3 feet at the back of the carport, resulting in a side setback of 7.7 feet, and a variance of 3.8 feet at the front of the carport, resulting in a side setback of 6.2 feet. Next slide. Number three, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or property owner. There had been no changes to the property during the present ownership that would have prevented the building of the carport within the current UDO setback requirements. Next slide. Number four, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. A carport is in character and use with the homes adjoining or in the vicinity of the property mentioned. The carport will architecturally match the house. No trees or bushes will be removed. The carport maintains use of the existing driveway and eliminates the need to increase the impervious area. The carport will not interfere with use of neighboring properties. An open carport maintains adequate air, light, and space between the buildings and does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or the general public. That completes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Willard. Just, you asked the question, but I want to be clear that you stated that you would like this submitted as part of the official record.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, any questions for Mr. Willard? I have one that maybe is for Mr. Hodge, just for my edification. When you measure the variance, do you measure to the post supporting the carport, or do you measure to the overhang of the carport? Where's that actual dimension?
So ordinarily, things like eaves and whatnot can overhang into a side yard to some extent. However, when this is not allowed to be in that location at all, the variance request should be inclusive of the entirety of the structure.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, any board questions?
Yeah, has there been any communication with the neighbor? Did I miss that, or was anything? I know there wasn't anything filed, but has there been any conversation with the neighbor?
Is that for the applicant or the staff?
Either. Sorry.
Staff has not received any comments from surrounding property owners.
All right, I'll turn that to the applicant. Have you had any discussion with your neighboring property to the something to the east?
Yes, I have, and there's no issue.
Okay. You have that in writing by chance?
I don't have it in writing, but it's been my neighbor for a long time, and he even helped me measure the footprint.
So it sounds like it wouldn't be a problem getting a document signed by your neighbor that confirms that he has no problem with this request?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Willard?
This is Steve Kinney. I have a comment and a question. Mr. Willard, I thought you gave a great presentation for not being attorney.
Thank you.
That said, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing the hardship on this one. Would you be able to remind us again what you were maintaining, or why there should be a hardship?
Well, I'm not clear exactly your question. Other than the hardship would be not being able to build the carport because of the UDO. Now, if you're referring to why I'm building the carport, there would be a different answer.
Well, I was just I didn't know if I missed anything or if there was anything more than just the fact that you would like to have a carport, if there was something I might have missed.
No, other than as you age, you looking for more protection from the elements and the sun, and when you load and unload your car and you get in and out of your car, it would be an advantage to not have to do that in the elements. Other than just protection from the elements for a newer vehicle, which everyone wants when they either build a garage or a carport. There's really nothing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Questions? Okay, then no one else signed up to speak in support or opposition on this case. Had no further board questions. Mr. Willard, anything further from you?
Nothing from me at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Hodge, anything else from you?
No additional comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll close the evidentiary hearing then and move to Board deliberations, again, this is a variance.
I mean, I think Steve kind of hit it. I don't see a massive hardship here. Having said that, I like the presentation, and in the spirit of what we've done before, I'm okay granting approval on this contingent. He provided a letter from his neighbor, basically agreeing that there's no hardship on the neighbor. Just a simple contingency. With the applicant's already said he thinks he can get pretty easily. So I just like to have that for the file. Obviously, the guy didn't oppose it. I just like, especially in this instance where I don't see a massive hardship, I'd like to have that.
If I could just add, this is Catherine, one thing too, is just keep in mind that in order to be admissible, the person writing the letter would need to also appear to enter the letter. Otherwise, it's hearsay. But that's just something to keep in mind. You're not, I guess, if you guys decide you want to accept a letter, you can, but for the purposes of reliance on it, it would be considered hearsay if the person doesn't.
What if it's an affidavit?
Yeah, or notarize.
Typically, I would advise that if you guys want to accept that, I'm not going to say you can't accept it, but typically I would advise that you have the person here so they're subject to cross-examination if necessary. But if you're just asking that it be provided to staff at the time of permit, maybe, you can make that a condition. I'm just trying to, typically I would advise though, when it comes to the meeting, not to accept that, since that person won't be here and subject to your cross-examination.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Mr. Coons?
I think that's wise advice. I think he should still provide one and submit it, out of a full permit. I think it's fine. I just want to have something in there that kind of hinges on that. But I think most of the ones we've seen beforehand like this, somebody has spoken for or provided, something to us with that. I just think because the proximity to it is pretty close. And I just hate to grant something like this without some sort of acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement could be light, but that's my opinion. I'm looking for other thoughts on this.
Were the neighbors provided notice?
All neighbors within 100 feet under the city's UDO is required to receive notice of the hearing. And also
Right.
that notice, because of COVID, tells them to sign up to speak if they wish to participate. So I assume this neighbor, if he's a next door neighbor, would have gotten notice. You can
You had
ask.
an opportunity to appear.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
And that would be your record on file too, since they received the notice.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Thanks for bringing that up, Justin. Yeah, I'm okay with no contingency then.
Okay, so good discussion, good observations. I'm certainly open to a motion here. Motion with a condition or without.
I'll motion to approve. No contingency.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Coons to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Mile, thank you for your second. Any further discussion? Then let's go to our roll call vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approved.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisell. I see your lips moving. Wave to say yes. Thank you. Mr. Sutton?
Yes, approved.
Okay, that's approved then. Thank you, Mr. Willard. Thank you for the effort you put into this. And
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
yes, sir. Okay. Whereas our last meeting was a marathon, today we've had a sprint. This is a refreshing change.
Congratulations.
Absolutely. Let us move along to approval of our minutes from our October 12th, 2020 meeting. Any comments, edits, suggestions, or a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor, I guess roll call vote again.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Ms. Yurdasil,
Approve.
Chairman Swink,
Approve.
Mr. Kenny,
Approve.
Mr. Sutton.
Approved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, anything from you today to add?
I actually do have something to add.
Yay.
Laz, can you switch Janie to panelist view, please? If she's on there, I want to introduce you to my coworker, Janie Richardson. She is also an associate city attorney here in our office. And she's in the meeting, and we're going to try to switch it so you can see her here in a second. But a little bit of a kind of a personal update. I'm not sure if you guys can tell because we're remote, but I'm having a baby. And so
Oh, congratulations.
thank you. It's a girl. Her name's Eliza. She's due in January.
Wow.
So it's sometime around your January meeting, actually. So I'm going to be out on maternity leave for February, March, maybe April, maybe January, depending on the timing. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce you guys to Janie, because while I'm out, Janie's going to be representing the board. Janie can tell you a little bit about herself, but I'll just let you know that she's been watching, or she's gone back and watched a couple of your meetings, and she's familiar with your processes you've been following. And so she's been kind of shadowing, and she will be at your next meeting as well in December. So Janie, do you want to kind of give your little introduction?
Sure. So as Catherine said, I'm going to be taking over for her while she's out for those few months. Just wanted to let you all know that look forward to working with you. I've been with the city for about 1.5 years now. Before that, I was in private practice here in Raleigh at Parker 12. And again, I look forward to working with y'all.
And I would note too that Janie is on the Cary Board of Adjustment. So she feels your pain.
I was going to say, so she knows how much hand holding she's going to have to do here.
She did say looking forward, Rodney. So we'll.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's good to have good help. I'll tell you that. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Catherine. That's awesome news.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. We are very excited. I feel like with the holidays, it's going to start speeding up. So trying to get all of our plans lined up.
No doubt. Anything else from you today?
Nope, that should do it for me.
Any board members have anything you want to share with us?
No.
Maybe have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. All, and please continue to stay safe, and we'll continue to meet remotely, maybe forever. But this has worked out pretty well. Thank you all for your patience and also for your participation. I'll
bring up one thing, Rodney. Let me bring up one thing. I don't want to let the cat in the bag. I know Michael and I discussed recently. Has there ever been a time limit set on a presentation, Catherine? I mean, it probably has, but is that something we've ever discussed?
The deal with quasi-judicial is that the applicant has the burden to present their case. And so the issue about setting a time limit is you don't want to restrict the applicant's ability to do that, to put on everything they have to do to present a case. With that said, one thing you can do when it comes to any speaker is to ask them to limit their testimony to the standards at issue and make sure that it's relevant, material, competent, substantial, especially when it comes to people who are in support or opposition, not the applicant case. If you're hearing the same thing over and over again, you can always ask that new things be here. But when it comes to the applicant's case, you want to be able to let them put on their full case. I think you're on mute there, John.
I figured that was probably the case. And maybe it can be suggestive at times, but sometimes when we go on the history of a site for 10 minutes and then, Keegan does it, then we hear it again. It's like, all right, here we are. I think we saw that last meeting and one, I think 2 meetings ago, where I felt that had we been a little more efficient, we could carve 45 minutes out of the deal. And the result is if you have a 5-hour meeting, the last one or two, applicants is, it's almost falling on deaf ears. It's like, just get me out of here. So that would be the payoff. But again, I hear you. I'm just going to put out there for thought and discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in just for purposes of sort of the historical perspective on it. And I think Don could probably do the same, but it's, some of these presentations are going like an hour now. And when I first joined about 2.5 years ago, we just never saw anything that was that lengthy. And so I think that's one of the concerns is if you just get a couple of presentations and you're 2.5 hours into the meeting with a full agenda behind it, that's an issue. And so I almost wonder if we can just somehow encourage folks to, even if we don't put time limits on it, maybe a gentle reminder to let's all be efficient with our words and sort of not get into sort of the repeating things and issues like that, because I do share John's concerns that some of these presentations, candidly, we're listening to things for 45 minutes to an hour that I think should take 15 minutes.
Well, and that's something that the chair can say if you'd like to. I can either add it into the intro, or you can say when you start each case that to remind applicants and anybody speaking that you're interested in testimony related to the standards that's relevant, competent material. So I think it's fine to give that gentle reminder if you would like to.
I think it's a good point. I'm glad you guys are raising this. I feel the same way. I feel like some of these cases, they're just a level of detail far beyond what is required for us to understand what's going on. And I also understand there's an obligation when you're paying to someone to represent you that person be very thorough to justify the value. I'm not questioning that, but sometimes we are getting a lot of minutia, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we're there, we can move on now. So if without putting limits on it, it would be nice, and maybe this is a chairman's prerogative without being disrespectful to sometimes step in and say, I think the point has been made. I don't know though. I guess it's a judgment call to kind of get people to move along. So
it's something to think on. I don't think we have to come up with an idea today, but it sounds like there are a few of us that have that concern, and I trust with the smart people on this call and Catherine's advice as well, we can probably come up with some verbiage or somehow to nudge this thing along so we don't get drug out. Because again, if I'm 5th or 6th on the list and it's 4:30 by the time I get there, we're tired, we're fatigued, and it really could do the city a disservice by going, let's just get this thing through here. I got to go. Those things, and that we're all human. That happens. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and you're wise to raise it.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone?
That's it. Good job. Thank you.
Good job today, everybody. Appreciate it, and we'll talk again in a month. In the meantime, stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.